At first, Joy ignored the warnings. She wanted the best cake in Abuja for her wedding. She didn't care if the baker only took orders at midnight. But now, seeing her husband crawl on the floor like an animal, Joy began to regret why she never listened. Once upon a time, in the beautiful city of Abuja, lived a popular cake shop named Winnie's Cakes. Their cakes were so impeccable that every bride in the city wanted a Winnie's cake on their big day. Each cake looked like a piece of heaven, smooth, tall, and laced with gold and glitter. But what people didn't know was that each slice carried something no human should ever eat. The owner of Winnie's Cakes was a woman named Winnie, a quiet woman in her late 40s who always wore gloves and never smiled. She lived alone and opened her shop only at night. People whispered about her, but no one ever dared to ask questions because her cakes were simply perfect. It all began one hot afternoon in the middle of a busy market. A beautiful, calm woman set up her stand with slices of delicious cakes, which she labeled as free. People trooped to the stand to have a taste, and that was how her name spread far and wide. And people began to troop to her shop, placing orders like their lives depended on it. Her cakes were so addictive, many of them said, as they bought as much as possible, sometimes fighting for extra slices. They said the moment you took a bite, your tongue danced in joy and your body felt warm like a hug from the inside. No one questioned how she baked so well. No one noticed that after every bite, they became quieter, more forgetful, and more obsessed. People who once hated sweets became regular customers. Children cried for her cakes. Husbands left home to sit outside her shop. The city praised Winnie, calling her a miracle baker. But no one knew the truth behind why she only took orders at night. Joy heard the rumors, of course. But like every other bride, she didn't care. She just wanted the best. When her wedding planner mentioned Winnie's Cakes, Joy jumped at the opportunity. She didn't even blink when she was told Winnie only accepts orders online at midnight. She simply paid in full. Her best friend Bissy had her reservations. "Are you sure about Winnie's Cakes?" she asked Joy, who gave her a weird look asking why. "Because I've heard so many strange and unsettling things about Winnie's Cakes," she said to Joy, who sat there and listened to what Bissy had to say. "A woman came to our church a few weeks ago claiming that her son ate the cake and fell terribly ill. She revealed that the young boy screamed and cried at night in his sleep, but no one knew for sure what was happening. He stopped eating food and only ate anything that was raw. The young boy ate raw meat and even began to eat the rats in their home. They brought him to the church, and after several prayers, the pastor revealed that the cake was behind all that had been happening to him." Joy burst out in laughter on hearing this. "You mean to tell me that a little boy ate rats in his room?" she asked as she continued to laugh. "That's ridiculous," she scoffed. "If people can believe a cake can turn a child into a cannibal, then they can believe anything. Abeg, I'm not cancelling my dream cake because of gossip," she said as she continued to speak. "You see that your church and pastor, they deserve an Oscar award," she said to Bissy, who she called gullible. "Is it that your hungry pastor that you are believing?" she asked Bissy, who frowned her face in disappointment. "Pastor Yemi is a good man of God. He may not be rich like the other pastors around, but he has the Holy Ghost in him," she said to Joy, who could not stop laughing. Joy was not the spiritual type. In fact, she never believed that things like ghosts and spirits existed. What Joy believed was that people liked to make up stories when they couldn't afford certain luxuries. Bissy stood up quietly, disappointed but not surprised. She had known Joy for years and knew that once Joy's mind was made up, not even thunder from heaven could stop her. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, Bissy knelt in her room and prayed. "God," she said, "I don't know what this cake is about, but I have a terrible feeling. Please protect Joy from all evil." she said as she continued to pray. Meanwhile, Joy was in her room asleep, dreaming of fireworks, a perfect honeymoon, and guests clapping as she cut her perfect cake. If only she knew what awaited her in the days to come. Her wedding dress was ready, and Joy could not hold back her excitement. She received a call from her fiancé Akin, informing her that his mother had just arrived from London. Joy had never met his mother before. All their communications were through text, and Joy could not wait to finally meet her. She prepared her favorite meal as she got dressed and headed straight to Akin's house. She arrived a few minutes later and met Akin, who introduced her to his mother. Mama Akin did not look too pleased to see her. Her sharp eyes scanned Joy from head to toe as she watched her drop the food she had prepared on the table. Mama Akin had not been in the country for almost 6 years, and Joy thought it wise to prepare her favorite meal. Not only did she prepare the meal, she also got some expensive bags and dresses for her, made with high-quality African print material. Little did she know that Mama Akin never liked her, despite Akin's constant efforts to convince his mother that Joy was the right woman for him. Mama Akin remained resistant, never fully accepting her as the woman that her son had chosen to marry. Joy could sense it in her countenance. She sat there and watched as Mama Akin ate her food like it was a chore, barely chewing before she swallowed. She didn't utter a single compliment, and when Joy handed her the beautifully wrapped gifts, Mama Akin took them without a smile. She opened one of the wrappers slowly and said flatly, "You really have a poor taste in fashion," she said to Joy, whose smile faded like a candle in the wind. Akin tried to ease the tension with a joke, but it fell flat. The air in the room was heavy, and Joy's smile began to fade. She had hoped this moment would be a warm welcome into the family, but instead, it felt like a cold courtroom where she was the accused. Mama Akin did not stop there. She leaned forward, resting her elbow on the armrest as she stared right at Joy, who sat there restless as she listened to her speak. "There is something about you that does not sit well with me. A dark storm looms over you, and no matter how hard you try to smile it away, it follows you like a shadow." Joy blinked, confused, as she stared at Mama Akin. "I had a dream," Mama Akin said, her voice colder than before. "In that dream, you were standing in the middle of a wedding hall. Everyone was clapping as you smiled, but then something strange began to happen. Your stomach began to grow so big, and before our very eyes, you gave birth to a dog. Everyone ran away in terror." Mama Akin said to Joy, who opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her lips quivered as a cold chill ran down her spine. Akin, stunned by the absurdity of his mother's words, tried to chuckle it off. "Mommy, that dream was probably just from jet lag or something you ate on the plane." But Mama Akin did not laugh. She stood up, picked her handbag, and gave Joy a sound warning. "If anything happens to my son, I will hold you responsible." She then turned to Akin and added, "My son, if you still go ahead with this wedding, you do so at your own peril." With that, she walked out of the room, leaving a thick silence behind. Joy sat there, numb, her fingers clenched tightly around the edge of her gown. Akin placed his hand on her shoulder gently. "Don't mind her, babe. You know how dramatic my mom can be." But Joy wasn't listening anymore. That night, she couldn't sleep. The dream Mama Akin described refused to leave her mind. She kept seeing herself in a white dress, her stomach swelling as dogs barked all around her. The wedding was only a few days away, and Joy could not help but worry. She spoke to her best friend BC, who urged her to fast and pray. "You need to cancel the cake order too," she said to Joy, who rolled her eyes and walked away. The wedding day arrived, and Joy did all she could to stay calm. She woke up that morning in her hotel room, terrified as her glam team arrived to get her ready for the wedding. Hours later, Joy arrived at the wedding venue, looking extremely beautiful. As she stepped out of the car in her expensive white dress, All eyes turned to admire her. The camera flashes lit up like stars as her gown shimmered under the sunlight. It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, but deep inside, Joy was terrified. Her eyes scanned the entire crowd as she walked into the wedding venue. That was when she saw the dress. The exact dresses she had lovingly picked and gifted to her mother-in-law. It was being worn by another woman, and Joy could not hide her sadness. Her heart sank as she looked again and saw the designer handbag that she had saved up to buy, now hanging on the shoulder of the same woman. Not only did Mama Akin reject her efforts, she had given them away like they meant nothing. Joy stood still as she blinked back the tears. Her husband-to-be Akin could not help but notice the sadness in her eyes. He asked what the problem was, and just as Joy was about responding to his question, the cake van pulled up in front of the venue. Joy could feel her heart race. She stood there shocked as she watched the handlers lift the cake out of the van. Before her very eyes, 12 fierce-looking dogs came charging from nowhere as they barked at the cake. The handlers managed to chase the dogs away as they carried the cake safely into the hall. The guests whispered between themselves, but the wedding planner quickly took the microphone and tried to ease the tension. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's just stray dogs. Please relax. The wedding must go on," she said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. A few guests clapped nervously. Others looked around, murmuring superstitions underneath their breath. But eventually, as the minutes passed, people began to settle back into their seats. Joy and Akin said their vows as everyone cheered for them to cut their cake. Joy stared at the cake for a minute as her heart began to race. Everyone gathered around the cake as they watched in anticipation. Cameras flashed, phones recorded, and chants of cut the cake rang out across the hall. Joy hesitated. For a split second, she remembered Bissie's warnings and the disturbing dream that Mama Akin had. As they sliced into the cake together, Joy could feel her hands shake as the waitress began to serve slices to the guests one after the other. Everyone seemed to be enjoying the cake as they licked their forks in delight. "It tastes like heaven," one woman said, as another replied her saying that the cake was the best cake that she had ever had. Even the woman Akin's mother had given the bag and dress, ate up the cake she was given and asked for another. From that moment on, the atmosphere at the wedding changed completely. Guests who once danced and laughed now sat silently, holding their empty cake plates as they all stared at the remaining cake. Some licked their plates clean, whilst others scraped their forks on the plates, hoping to gather even a crumb. Joy watched in confusion as people formed small lines around the cake table, pleading for an extra slice. Some offered to pay for more, holding out crumpled naira notes with desperate eyes. The waitress tried to explain that the cake was finished, but they didn't believe her. They stayed and stared. Akin, however, seemed the most affected. After his third slice, he became restless and began to sweat. Then he asked Joy quietly, "Did they pack the leftover cake?" Joy looked at him shocked, because the Akin that she knew was not a lover of cake. She informed him that the cake had finished, and the rage she saw in his eyes in that moment sent shivers down her spine. Hours later, they returned home, and Akin could not stop searching for cake. He searched every wedding bag and even opened the empty gift boxes, hoping to find some cake, but found none. He became so irritable and began to turn the house upside down. Joy stood in the corner terrified. She tried to calm him down, but Akin was so inconsolable. His mother dropped by to check up on them when she met her son, pale and disoriented. At this point, he had stopped speaking, and Mama Akin froze at the sight of him curled up in a corner of the living room, clutching an empty plate as he begged for more cake. "Akin?" she called gently, bending to touch his shoulder. But Akin looked up at her and began to laugh hysterically. He was acting like a madman and Mama Akin could not hide her fear. Joy tried to explain, but Mama Akin was not willing to hear what she had to say. "What have you done to my son, you witch?" she asked repeatedly, as Joy did all she could to convince her that the cake was behind it all. But Mama Akin found it hard to believe. "You are a witch," she spat, her voice rising as she spoke. "I warned Akin. I warned him that something was wrong with you, but he didn't listen. Now, you have made my son mad," she said to Joy, who stood there broken as she began to regret why she didn't listen to her friend's warnings. She watched from a distance as Mama Akin moved into their new home to care for her son. She didn't allow Joy to come close to him as she locked her out of the bedroom. Joy was so devastated. She didn't know what to do. Akin had now progressed to eating fresh meat from the freezer, and Joy could not believe her eyes. She stood there stunned as her mind raced back to the story BC told her a while ago about the boy who ate rats in his house. Joy in that moment knew that she couldn't ignore the truth any longer. The cake was cursed, and now her husband was its prisoner. So the next morning, she paid a visit to her friend BC, who welcomed her in with a knowing look as if she had been waiting for this moment. "I'm ready," Joy said as her voice shook. "Take me to your pastor. My husband is under a spell, and I think we need prayers." BC took her to Pastor Yemi's small church, which was tucked away in Gaki. The moment he saw Joy, Pastor Yemi closed his Bible and stood to his feet. "You finally believe," he said softly, as Joy nodded her head, unable to control her tears. "Please, help my husband. He is under a spell," she said to Pastor Yemi, who held her hands and began to pray. After a few minutes, he opened his eyes and looked at Joy. "This is no ordinary affliction," he said. "The cake was not just food, it was a spiritual bait. The enemy used it to enter your home, and if nothing is done, your husband will be destroyed like the others." Joy trembled as she began to cry. "Can he be free?" she asked the pastor, who replied her saying that he had to pray for her husband in person. The deliverance must be done in the presence of the afflicted, he said as Joy felt a sense of relief. She begged the pastor to accompany her home, knowing how difficult it would be to bring her husband to the church. However, when they arrived at the house, Mama Akin slammed the door in their faces. "I knew you'd return with one of your fake prophets," she said coldly, accusing Joy of trying to finish what she had started. "You want to kill my son completely, right?" "Never," she said to Joy, who pleaded with her to allow the pastor pray for her husband. But Mama Akin was not willing to listen. "Get out and take this charlatan with you," Mama Akin shouted, as she shut the door in their faces. Joy broke down in front of the door, unsure of what to do. Pastor Yemi helped her to her feet. "You must not give up," he said calmly. "The enemy thrives in secrecy, but if we expose it, the chains can be broken." Joy wiped her tears as a fire began to burn in her chest. She had been mocked, blamed, humiliated, but now she needed to get proof. "If Mama Akin won't believe me," she said quietly, "then I'll show her the truth myself." That night, Joy prepared herself for what she never imagined she'd do. She was going to get proof from the cake shop to show the world that the evil cakes were behind all the strange things that had been happening. She waited in the corner of the shop until the lights flickered on at exactly 12 midnight. Joy could feel her heart race. She walked towards the building terrified as she heard a sound coming from the bakery. Someone was in there humming a song that filled her entire body with fear. Joy peeped to see who it was and caught sight of something that terrified her to her bones. She quickly brought out her phone and began to record as she caught sight of Winnie, who had now transformed into a mermaid. The entire bakery looked like it had been submerged in water, as several other mermaids baked the cakes with a speed that Joy could not understand. There was no fire, no ovens, and yet the cakes were baking themselves. As Joy recorded, she noticed that the cakes weren't just rising, They were breathing. Joy nearly screamed when she saw an eye pop out from one of the cakes. She covered her mouth as she tried not to scream. She watched in stunned silence as the mermaids baked hundreds of cakes in a minute. The cakes looked so beautiful, but Joy could see that they were alive. She quickly stopped her recording and turned to head back home when she caught sight of the strange dogs that surrounded her wedding cake. Joy was so terrified of dogs. She began to run as the strange dogs chased after her. She ran as fast as her legs could carry her, praying that she survives the chase. Joy ran for a few minutes and fell to the ground. Her whole life flashed before her eyes as she watched the dogs approaching. She screamed out for help, scanning her environment for a stick or stone that she could throw at them. However, just as she tried to hit them with a stick, she heard a voice speaking. It was one of the dogs, and Joy could not believe her ears. "Don't hit us," the dog said, revealing to her that they had not come to harm her. Joy could not believe that she was talking to dogs. She stood there terrified as one of the dogs began to talk. "My name is Maggie," the dog said, as it revealed to her that they were all humans turned to dogs by the evil mermaid. She continued to speak, revealing that the entity that now ruled Winnie's cakes was not the real Winnie. On the day when they launched Winnie's cakes, they were overtaken by evil forces who turned them into dogs and took over the bakery. The real Winnie was transformed into a dog alongside her workers, who were all eager to start work that fateful day. They stood there and watched helplessly as the evil forces shared evil cakes to unsuspecting people. On the day of her wedding, they tried to stop her from cutting the cake, but it was already too late. Maggie's eyes glistened with tears as she continued to speak. "We backed with everything in us," she said, her voice breaking. "But no one could understand us because we are dogs. We can only speak to you now because your eyes have been opened to the truth." Joy staggered back, overwhelmed by all that she had heard. The other dogs sat silently, their eyes filled with sadness, as they nodded at Maggie's words. "I didn't know. I thought you were attacking me. I thought you were veiled," she whispered as her voice trembled. Maggie shook her head gently as she continued to speak. "No, Joy, we were trying to protect you," she said to Joy, who stood there, crying to see her fellow humans transformed into dogs. Joy decided to help them in that moment. She took them to Pastor Yemi, who prayed and broke the spell that had kept them bound for years. The dogs began to transform before their eyes. Joy recorded the whole process as their limbs stretched and their fur fell away like dust. Their faces morphed from snouts to human features, and within minutes, 5 human beings, 2 men, and 3 women stood in front of Joy and Pastor Yemi, wrapped in white clothes. The freed workers wept in gratitude. Their bakery, their dreams, their very lives had been stolen and for years. They had backed in silence, warning every soul they could. Joy knelt beside them as she began to apologize. "I'm so sorry I didn't believe. I ignored the signs. And now my husband has been transformed into a monster. And my mother-in-law has refused to let me close. She believes I have a hand in what is happening to him," Joy said as she let out a loud cry. But Winnie placed a hand on her shoulder, reassuring her that it wasn't too late. "With all the proof you have now, I'm sure your mother-in-law will be convinced," she said to Joy, who shook her head in agreement and wiped her tears. Hours later, they all arrived at Akin's house and heard a loud scream coming from inside the house. It was Mama Akin screaming in terror, and everyone wondered what could be happening. They broke down the door and met Akin biting his mother as she screamed. The pastor immediately went into intense prayers, sprinkling holy water and olive oil at Akin, who fell to the ground unconscious. Mama Akin broke free as she ran to the corner, thankful to be alive. Akin's body lay still on the floor as silence fell across the entire house. Joy, trembling with fear and love, rushed to his side and held his hand. Mama Akin stood in the corner, terrified to come close to her son, She stood there and watched as Joy held her husband's hands and continued to pray. Aching after several long minutes, finally woke up. He blinked slowly, like someone waking from a long, painful nightmare. His eyes, once wild, were now human again. His wife Joy let out a sob as she buried her head into his chest, thanking God for saving his life. Pastor Yemi smiled gently as he whispered words of thanksgiving. Mama Akin, still trembling, inched forward as she began to cry. "Akin," she said, her voice cracking, "forgive me. My son, forgive me. I should have listened. I thought she was the problem," she said as she began to plead with Joy to forgive her. Mama Akin began to regret how badly she treated Joy, how she gave out the gifts that Joy had given to her. Joy looked up at Mama Akin, her eyes swollen from tears. But somehow, in that moment, Joy found strength. She stepped forward and held Mama Akin's hands. As she forgave her for all that she did, Mama Akin burst into tears as she held Joy tightly, thanking her for saving her son. "Thank you, my daughter. You are not a witch. You are an angel. I'm sorry for everything." Joy in that moment felt a peace that she could not explain. That same night, she uploaded the video of the underwater bakery, the humming mermaids, and the shocking transformation of dogs back into humans. And within 24 hours, the video had over 3 million views. News outlets across Nigeria picked up the story as the nation stood still from the revelation. Government officials arrived to seal the shop. But by the time they arrived, the ground where the bakery once stood was nothing but ash, and in the middle of the rubble lay one last uneaten slice of cake that was untouched by the fire. Scientists could not explain it. The government called it an accident. But Joy, Pastor Yemi, and the 5 workers who were once dogs knew the truth. Mothers began to pray over their children's birthday cakes, and brides began to think twice before ordering their wedding cakes. Joy and Akin finally got the chance to live happily as husband and wife. They were so grateful to God for giving them another chance as they began to take their spiritual life seriously. That was how the evil behind Winnie's cakes was exposed, and people began to be more cautious of the vendors that they patronize. The lesson to be learned from this story is that we must never ignore the warnings and signs around us, no matter how harmless something may look. Not everything that looks beautiful is good, and not every gift is truly a blessing. Joy's story teaches us that spiritual things are real, and listening to wise counsel can save a life. We must be prayerful, careful with what we eat, and never place physical beauty over spiritual safety. It also reminds us not to judge others too quickly. Sometimes, the people we reject are the ones sent to help us. In all things, we must seek God's direction and protection, because evil can hide in even the sweetest things.
I hope you enjoyed the story.